Pete, my brother, why don't you bring us in with a little? What is that? First of all, what is this instrument?
This is kind of based. I first was introduced to this harmonic overseries flute. Overtone flute is also known as in Siberia, up throughout parts of Europe. It's kind of been all over the world, probably in Africa, because it uses the harmonic series to get its tone. So it's just one single shaft, and
no holes.
Well, just one at the fibble and one at the end. That's it.
Well, yeah.
But no, but no.
Otherwise, it's a stick.
Otherwise, it's just a stick. Kind of like the didge,
Listen, everybody. All you need is a stick, and it'll make this sound. Yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Welcome back, my man.
Thank you, bro.
It's been good to have you out this week.
Yeah, it's been super sweet. Hang in.
Yeah. And this is one of those times where you can almost mark time on this podcast, and be like, what happened since the last time you're here? And this time in particular, lots of shit happened.
So much.
First of all, we got to talk about your remix album for Ayahuasca. That was a hell of a project, and it turned out so dope. So good. So how did that evolve?
Well, it's pretty incredible. So last time we chatted, we were in the first stages. We just gotten some of the remixes, and we were in like this. I hadn't done any of my own collaborations on the remixes yet. Yeah. And literally, after I spoke with you, kind of through the next course of the last 6 months or so, they started trickling in. And I started actually working with Amani, who's from Desert Dwellers. He's one of the main producers, and he's the kind of the head. Him and Trevor Moontribe, they run Desert Tracks, which is the label that put it out.
Yeah.
And so started collaborating more with him on another project called Liquid Bloom, which is also like medicine music, down tempo,
which is incredible as well. and I want to get into more of that too, because you started singing Icaros on that, and had to basically teach yourself the songs of the plants, and the medicine songs. So I want to talk about that for sure too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we started collaborating last winter when I was trying to work on my solo album finally and get the live looping album out. And in that process, he starts hitting me up and being like, hey, I'm trying to push out this Liquid Bloom project. Have a listen. See if there's anything here that inspires you. And these songs started just coming through. And I'm like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So kind of put that on pause, dived into that, and which is beautiful because then that album dropped this spring, the Regenerations album that he did. And I collaborated on Deodova's on that, crazy Australian, goddess and singer, and lots of other artists. And, I added like African Ngoni and started putting down the Icaros, and it was just amazing. And so then out of that, he's like, well, we should do one of the remixes. Because I was trying to get Desert Dwellers to do one. He's like, we're just too busy, dude. He's like, there's no way, Trevor's in LA and super busy, and I'm busy with that. So he's like, how about we do one with Liquid Bloom and Porangui? Let's like do a collaborative remix. And so I literally went back to the song of all songs, the title song, Ayahuasca, which the original was with the jaw harp, right? With the dam moi, the Vietnamese jaw harp. And it's an intense one. It's one that like drives in the medicine. It's really a trance one. And so we went back to it, and literally I had these lyrics that had come through back when I wrote the first song, but I had it muted in the file because it was for dialogue, it was for the documentary. So I was like, that's going to be too distracting. So it's not in there. So I went back and pulled these lyrics out, and I'm like, oh, they were hidden in this thing. And so I started like working with them. I showed them to Amani, and he was like, yeah, and there's more there. Like, he kind of pushed me a little bit further, and it was perfect because then this whole other melody came out. And so the song that's on the remix album is actually kind of a new song. Yeah. In truth, it's like
all of them kind of are new songs. I mean, this is not like a slight tweak,
no, these are
where a hip hop song they call it a remix because like one other rapper drops like 2 new bars on it, and you're like, remix.
Exactly.
No, this is a fucking real remix, and it turned something that was kind of trance meditation music into something that's more still has some of that trancey vibe, but is also like danceable and more upbeat and kind of moves you in just different ways. And the bass and the way that you feel these songs is just different. Like if you're listening, it's all on Spotify, and we'll tell you how to get there. But it's Ayahuasca Remixes, and you got to listen to it on something with some bass.
Ayahuasca Remixed.
Remixed. Oh yeah, remixed.
We did the remix because it kind of felt like the brew getting remixed.
Right?
You know what I'm saying?
Right. One extra stir of the
One
spoon,
extra stir of the
and you
spoon.
get something totally different.
Boom.
That makes perfect sense.
Totally. And the medicine was, how do we take this? So when we were envisioning it, like, what's the intention? So Sauna, Shaman's Dream, and he's the other one, that very first track, Ancestors, we collaborated on that remix. And also I brought in this prayer that I opened it with, which is a blending of Quichua and Quechua and Spanish and English, and just kind of brought all these elements together to open the whole album. We kind of wanted to set the intention. Mm-hmm. But as we started and we sent out the invitation letters to all these producers on DJs, we were like, okay, how do we had to like select, like, who are the guys who are going to be able to keep the spirit of this medicine, the spirit of the original prayer of this music in the remix? Because we didn't want it just to become like a pop, like, big dance song, like lose that medicinal property.
Yeah.
The spirit of it. And so it was really powerful. So we sent that out. That was part of the letter. It's like, if you choose to take on this mission, it's like, this is about how do we embody this prayer from the master plan and bring it to the dance floor and bring it to your movement prayer. It's almost like embodying the intention and the prayer of the original seed of everything that happened that we all experienced in the jungle.
Yeah.
And now bringing that into action moving forward. So it can literally be the theme song as you go into battle.
Yeah. How many of the people, I mean, it seems like to play that type of music, you have to have experienced ceremony on some level. Like, you run in the circles with these musicians. Like, how common is it for them to have experienced these kind of extrasensory, ecstatic states, whether through plants or something else? It's got to be almost universal, right?
I think so, especially with this crew. Like, pretty much every remixer on the album has definitely sat in ceremonial space, has definitely worked on shadow work. Mm-hmm. Like, all of them, they were pretty much hand selected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't, I don't know, I guess you could hypothesize someone who just, the music is their ecstatic state, and they haven't really experienced anything else. But you see people now in this culture that are, way more open, especially on that kind of artistic. And once you've been exposed to it and talked to people who've been through it, it's almost ubiquitous now that in some way and somehow, you found your path to get out of your head, to rebalance all of the craziness that's going on and find your center. And, that definitely comes through
big time
in the tracks.
Yeah. You feel it. And it was kind of, and we did some back and forth with several of the remixers. It was like, okay, tweak this, adjust this. Like, we want this to be more emphasized and, little minor tweaks here and there. And it was like, because we wanted this to just come through in such a powerful way. That's why it took almost a year, in the making of the remixes.
Now, we won't mention names, but I remember you mentioning to me that there was one artist that who uses the plants themselves to edit his music.
Oh, yeah.
All right? Like lays down the tracks and then is like, gets on board with the plants and is like, now let me see how this is. And I always thought about doing that. I thought about doing that with, with subsequent books. I have a book.
Right?
I have a book right now that's called, I don't know when I'll release it, if I'll release it, whatever, but I've been compiling this thing called Shit the Plants Taught Me. Right. And it's all kind of laid out. And I was like, the only editor that makes sense for this book is the plants themselves. That's right. It. So like the only way I'm going to let anybody edit this is if I get in the same state in which I got the download and then sit with it and be like, well, is this right? Did I get it right?
Does it resonate or no?
Like, yeah, exactly. I mean, you told me this. So if I got it wrong, like, let me know. Like, please edit this, It's pretty funny though. So, that'll eventually come out. I'm just learning so much more from the plants. I mean, when do you release that book?
Right.
It's like an ongoing
edit.
Ongoing saga.
Ongoing. Yeah. And you keep tuning in, keep asking, keep checking, right?
Right.
Yeah. With this. So that was essentially, the remixes were essentially that prayer. It was like, is it ready? And like, just really sitting with it and like feeling into it. It's like, okay, now it's time. And so we bloomed it on November 3rd. Which was, really powerful. And I mentioned this on the podcast with Kyle. That date, November 3rd, I almost died in 2003. That was like an anniversary date for me of when I was rolled in a car and smashed. on my way to see my
I was
grandfather.
hoping it was going to
hospital.
be another Amanita muscaria mishap story.
Oh yeah, that's,
I mean, car crash, Porangui, that's a little pedestrian, you know.
it's a little pedestrian, whatever, right?
Car crash, car smash. You know, I want another accidental overdose on a toxic mushroom
Nice.
story.
Oh, yeah.
If you're gonna die, all right, do not go out in a fucking car crash. Please, that is not the way to go.
It wasn't time.
It's got to be something weird if you're going
weird.
out.
Yeah, the Amanita one, that was definitely a close call too. We've had several very close encounters already in this lifetime. It's like Spirit keeps saying, okay, your job's not done. You got work to do, homie.
And the cliff notes of the Amanita story, because it's too long to get into on this podcast. But basically, in the pre-Google iPhone days, when you didn't have all information available in the palm of your hand, and you happened upon a wild psychedelic mushroom, you didn't know how to prepare it. You didn't know what the dose was. You didn't know that Amanita is quite toxic for the first go round. But yeah, and those of you who are interested, there's a podcast I just dropped with Taro, who's the founder of Four Sigmatic, and drops a bunch of knowledge about Amanita. So
Yeah.
save that story for that.
Deep respect to the Amanitas.
Woo!
Oh yeah.
Powerful force.
Yeah, don't play with those guys unless you really know what you're doing.
Yeah. And you got someone whose piss you really want to drink.
Exactly.
It's the only way to roll. All right. So the Liquid Bloom album
Yeah.
and the Icaros,
Yeah.
right? So in tradition, Icaros are taught by the plants, or taught
plants.
by the medicine, or taught by something else.
In dieta,
But there is like a language. There is like a lexicon, because ultimately the plants provide information, but that information doesn't come in English, and it doesn't come in, still it's being translated through some kind of symbolic structure. And so I think you went about teaching yourself the symbolic structure and then opened yourself up to, the Icaros, which really just flow through, right? Is that kind of how it goes?
Yeah, essentially, I didn't have the luxury to do a full-on dieta and to go down in the jungle to receive these. So for me, it was more about getting myself into that meditative state, dropping into the medicine in that way, even without the medicine. For me, and I think, and I'm going out on a limb here, but I trust that most ayahuasqueros would agree with this, is that the medicine is always in us. It's always with us.
Yeah.
The moment we say yes to go sit, the moment it's already started, the ceremony's already begun.
That's for sure.
Right? And you've felt this yourself. And so there's something really profound in the frequency, the vibration of the music. I relate it to like homeopathy. Homeopathy is like this vibrational medicine.
I relate nothing about ayahuasca to homeopathy. I put those as far on the opposite side.
No.
I think maybe something's working to fuck, oh shit, fuck. That's the spectrum for me.
Well, there's the subtle, right? And there's the so overt.
I either need to get your homeopathy
check,
or you need to get my ayahuasca. Because one way or another, those things aren't lining up.
Well, I mean it in so much as the music is like it carries the frequency, the vibration, right? And so I guess that's what I mean. It's like in the same way that you can take this like super diluted, it's like a spoonful of whatever it is diluted in the body of a lake, and you got a spoonful of that water, and then you take it, and somehow it still has a medicinal effect. It's like the music, when you start to just think of the melody, when you start to feel, just hum it, almost like it immediately calls in those plant teachers.
Yeah.
And they start working through you. And so in the same way, it's like I was able to drop into those states in meditation, and I didn't have to sit with the plant medicine, and I was able to call in that spirit to like, okay, work with me. What wants to come through? What's the message? What is the medicine right now for this moment, for this sound? And so in the studio, in my little cave there in Sedona, was able to really bring in these pieces. And it was amazing. It was like literally one of those things where in the process, as I was doing these, trying to do takes, and I'm running the whole session myself, all the recording and everything. It's like a lot of times you lose all inspiration. Like by the time you've set up the mic and you got all the levels set, and then you're like, okay, record.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
So literally, it was like I had it all set up, and then I went out on the land and come back and just drop in. And just let it go. And there was no pre-intended, no like writing out a lyric. It was just
freestyle.
Yeah.
I remember when I was in my Rose Dieta. So that was an interesting thing, because in the tradition, if you diet the plant well, you get the Icaro at the end. Totally. And that was stressing me the fuck out, because I've never created a song in my life. I have like creating melodies just from my head. I mean, I can play the flute and something will develop, but if I think about it, same with drums. If like I think about a beat, I'm toast.
That's it.
Right? Like I'm done.
Monkey
So I was like,
mind.
there's no fucking way I'm going to get an Icaro, no matter how well I diet this plant, no matter what I do. And then I remember we did some body work during the dieta.
That's right.
And a rose Icaro came through you. And I was like, oh man, that's beautiful. I have no chance. But then sure enough, like last days, like a little song and melody came through, like my own little Icaro that I got. And it was cool because I was thinking about it for like the whole last week, like trying to write stuff. It was like, well, I can write a poem. I guess maybe my Icaro is a poem. I was just using my brain. And then all of a sudden it just like slapped me awake. And I was like, oh, and it had the melody and it had the words and I just had to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And I should really, I haven't
You
sung
said
it in a long time.
Get out of the way, though.
Get out of the way. That's the key.
That's the medicine.
We'll try and play as many of these tracks that we're listening to here
Totally.
so that people can drop in and feel it as well. The other thing
With subwoofer.
with subwoofer, yes, or at least get one of those good bass,
Good headphones.
good headphones. Yeah. The other thing I want to chat with you about is you went through your own initiation ceremony that sounded far beyond anything that I've experienced, and you got invited to participate in the Sundance. And so, tell us a little bit about that and how that experience went.
Yeah. God, so much has happened since the last time we
know,
said,
right?
huh? So Sundance, yeah, I got re-invited actually is how it's kind of, you could think of it. When I was 12 years old, my mother Sundance for 8 years when I was a young man. And at age 12, I was invited to also dance and I wasn't ready at that time.
And explain when you say my mother Sundance, that might sound to some people like, yeah, she's cruising out in the sun, sundress,
Dancing around in her
dancing around. Maybe has like a champagne, a mimosa, a little, like who knows what a Sundance is? It ain't that.
It ain't that. No, Sundance is one of the 7 sacred ceremonies of Lakota Sioux that was handed down and has been also adopted by other tribes, with permission. The Dene, specifically the Navajo, and where I danced up at Little Big Medicine is the name of the Sundance, and it's there near the Four Corners in wheat fields up on the Navajo Nation, Dene Nation, and it's a magical place. And they've gone up to Sundance up in the Lakota, the Lakota traditional lodge, and brought the pipe, the chanupa, to run this Sundance, and it's been going on for over 15 years in this particular location. My mom danced at a camp called Anime Camp at Big Mountain, and at the time, we'd just kind of been back. We were in Tucson. She started to frequent a drum circle. Although again, another misnomer. A lot of people who think drum circle, think a bunch of djembes around a fire, and dreadlocks. This
is a drum circle, but not this drum circle.
Not this drum circle. This is more traditional, native drum circle, and learning the songs, these medicine songs. And I was 8 years old at that time, and we started to go. And this is when I did my first inipi ceremony, sweat lodge ceremony, purification, as an 8-year-old, and would go, and it was like just kind of getting fully indoctrinated into that work, into that medicine path. And she was eventually adopted by a Dene elder, and was invited to Sundance, and you have to be invited.
If you're taking notes on how to build a wizard, take notes. At 8 years old, first sweat lodge.
Poor lodge.
At 12 years old, first ayahuasca. Follow the path, everyone. If you're looking to build a small wizard into a big wizard, take notes. Okay, carry on.
So we eventually then went up to Big Mountain. So I would go every summer with her, and she committed to Sundance. Sundance is a 4-year commitment. So one cycle or 1 year to a Sundancer is 4 years to everybody else. And so it means committing to going every year you go in the summer. And just to describe it to you all, a Sundance ceremony is essentially, it's 9 days. It's 4 days of preparation, of just getting the body ready, purification. You build the arbor, you start to prepare the grounds and prepare yourself. And then 4 days of the dance, where the dancers go into a food and a water fast. And we dance from before sunrise with the rising sun all the way to sunset. You do 2 sweat rounds in the morning and 2 sweat rounds in the evening. So it's 4
without
rounds.
any water.
And no water. You maybe have a little sip of water in the sweat, but like, doesn't really count. You're basically getting like, so you're essentially fully dehydrated and your body's just going through this. And the whole point is to have vision, is basically take your body to the brink of death.
Yeah.
And the whole, really, the medicine comes out of going to that edge just in the physical being, and really testing your body, taking it through the most difficult paces it could ever go through so that you can receive a vision.
Yeah. But actually, you've left out an even more intense part of it. It's like, yeah, all right, so no food, no water. We're going to go to Sweat Lodge.
At the peak of summer in the desert.
Peak of summer in the desert, and we're going to dance all day.
Yes.
But more.
Dancing is key. And then of the 4 days, you know, and there's different ways to pray. You know,
if that doesn't sound intense enough for you, hold on. There's more.
There's definitely more. You know, and the key to all of this is that, you know, you're going into this trance state, you're praying, and you're going through the suffering because you're praying for everyone. You're praying for the earth. You're praying for all sentient beings, all your relations. The Mitakuye Yasin is very applicable here. This is where this really comes from, I think, and anchors. And for me is where I really got the embodied teaching of it. Because on one of the days, of the 4 days, you can choose which day we have what's called the piercing round. And so you'll pierce. And the way that you pierce, there's numerous ways that the dancers can pierce, you know, whether that be off of the chest, on the back, you know, you pull skulls on the back, or you are tied to the tree, which is one of the more common ways. It's the way I pierced for my first year.
All right, so let's go describe this again to other people. So when Poranguy's saying pierce the back, you know, some people might think maybe like a nipple piercing, you know, something friendly like that. No. You carve your own wooden plug.
You have to, spikes, yeah.
You carve your own spike, right? And then if it's from the back, then you actually take that spike and you pierce your skin.
You have help.
You have help. Well, obviously it's on your back.
Chief,
so you can't
the chief and the sub-chief.
Right, so they pierce your skin with your own spike that you whittled out. And then if it's skulls, you drag heavy buffalo skulls while you dance.
Multiple ones around the arbor. And the goal is to do 4 rounds before you break.
Before you break, this means that when you break, that's when you actually, the weight of the skulls are so much that you lunge forward or dance forward or allow spirit to carry you forward.
It's got to be spirit.
Ideally.
Otherwise, you're hurting.
Otherwise, you're really hurting.
You're really hurting.
And the plugs, the little spikes that you've carved and lovingly hand carved, they pull out of your back. Now, that's one way to do it, and that's dragging skulls.
Sometimes kids have to get on the skulls if it doesn't break. Some people have really tough, so the little children will sit on it.
If you got tough skin, kids go. So that way, when you can really.
So that's one.
That makes sense.
On the front.
On the front, and then let's describe what you did when you put it on the front. Because for Porangui, you know, the idea of dehydration and dancing for 4 days was like, yeah, whatever. I got more.
It was definitely a test of everything I had. Yeah, so profound, man. And the sweats, you know, it's like, that's actually when you get your moisture because you're in the sweat lodge. You're just like, okay, take in this water. Even though you're sweating.
Your own face.
Licking
your own arm. Recycle it.
But you know, it's really about the prayer. It's like you got to be in your prayer. Because if you get in your head, it's like you're saying, if you don't get out of the way, just like with the Icaro for you, it's like you're hurting because you're there all day. And when you're in the prayer and you're in the dance, like everything comes to you. Like I was getting visions. I saw everyone that I've ever met, everyone that's ever been a significant piece of my life, like everyone coming to me in those prayers. And I was able to pray for them. Like you have all this time and space. What you're doing is just praying.
The strongest resistance builds the strongest adaptation.
Truly.
And, you know,
truly.
The deepest commitment to faith and the deepest commitment to, you know, I mean, it's the principle behind like a Tony Robbins firewalk, right? Like you have this resistance in front of you.
Yeah.
And you have to have faith that you'll be able to make it through the other side. And there tends to be a correlation. I haven't seen the double-blind study here on this, but there tends to be a correlation with those. And I've experienced this in my own certain ways where the more you believe that you're going to make it through that thing all right, for some reason, the less your feet burn. You know, and in this way, it has to be the same thing. The more you have the faith that you're being carried, you know, you're being carried through this process.
Yeah.
The more that you can make it through. Because if you start to panic and those thoughts go through your head, that nocebo effect will take place.
Nocebo.
Yeah. Or the placebo effect of the positive belief will take place. And we've shown time and time again, whether it's lifting weights or getting sick or getting well, this shit is real. Like there's no doubt that the nocebo and the placebo are real. And I think it's just, we have no idea how far that extends.
Right.
You know?
Right. Literally.
And it's
global, cosmic level.
Immense. So for you though,
so my process, right?
Yeah.
So literally, so the day, this is really, I think, a significant piece for me. You know, it was my first year dancing, and so I had been invited, like I said, back at 12. My mom gave me my pipestone when which is the stone that you have to then finish yourself carve, in the tradition to make your chanupa, and then eventually the wood staff, which is so the feminine is the stone and the wood is the masculine.
And would this be called a peace pipe?
This is what would be the equivalent of peace pipe, or the chanupa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what we used to pray with tabaco, with grandfather teacher tabaco to send our prayers, and those who Sundance earn the right through Sundance to carry the chanupa. That's part of a requisite to really carry a chanupa in the tradition, because you have to earn that. It's like stepping onto the medicine path.
I really wanted a chanupa too. Oh well.
Well, you can go buy them at a trading post, obviously, but
no, it doesn't count. You can't now.
It's kind of you can't now. You gotta earn it, brother.
Nope, you gotta earn it.
So the invitation's there. If you ever feel called.
Edit that out, please. Edit that out. We don't need it. We don't need that. We don't need that to be public record. We'll just pretend that didn't exist.
We're just gonna
sprinkle the seeds.
Sprinkle little seeds there.
All right, carry on.
Okay, so the chanupa, my mom gave me that stone. She said, when you're ready, you'll finish it. And I didn't know what that really meant. And it took me 24 years to really come full spiral, and until one of my uncles, we were in sweat. This is a couple years ago, and it actually was part of your fault.
Yes.
Because you went to me and you're like, P, I think it's time for us to bring an Ipi ceremony into the retreats, the spirit optimization retreats, and what we've been doing, create a rites of passage. And I was like, absolutely. And you're like, can you pour that? I'm like, absolutely not. Because I know, my mom's been pouring lodge my whole childhood growing up. It's like, you have to dance. You have to complete Sundance at least 1 year before you have the right to pour a traditional lodge. And there's rainbow lodges and there's other people who pour lodges and all that, but it's to do it in the way, like, I can't do that just out of obligation and of the path and my lineage. It's like, I'd be total, It'd
be like someone going to the trading post and
buying a chanupa. And saying that, like, I'm a pipe carrier now, It's you don't just, it's something you really have to earn. And because in the earning of it, it's like some people who go to sit in an Aya ceremony and they're like, oh man, I'm going to start pouring. I'm like, Aya told me I'm fully certified. And
good luck with that.
Good luck with that. It's like, you got to know how to hold space. You have to know what to deal with when shit goes down and how to anchor sacred space in the worst conditions possible. And that you don't just learn, you don't just, think of it cognitively. You have to live it, embody it. And that comes through this hardship that you go through, like going through the eye of the needle. And so that really brings me to this piece. So this story is that the first day we Sundance, I make it through the first day and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, you also didn't know that you had to whittle your own spikes or something like
that? I didn't, yeah. No,
so you had to do that you had to do that late.
My uncle left out a few key details. He can be a little absent-minded. And
he's like, oh, by the way, the things that you're stabbing into your chest, you got to make those.
You got to make your own spikes and you got to make your own harness. Because the harness ties, it's like a rope harness. Which will ultimately, the spikes come through your, the fascia on your chest, and then you have to then tie the harness to that, and then that comes up and ties to the rope that's tied to the top of the tree.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like how you connect to the tree. And so when I got there, I saw guys working on their harnesses, and I'm like, oh, you got to make your own harness that's not provided? They're like, no, man, you make your own everything.
You get that shit at REI.
You get that shit at REI, exactly.
Where's your, do you have your chest piercing spikes and your the harness so I can tie to the mother tree and sun dancing? And they're like, oh yeah, it's over in aisle 7B.
Exactly.
Not quite.
Not quite. No. So it was really beautiful. My dad actually ended up helping me with the wood. So my dad went out and, I told him I was dancing, and he was like, he was so proud. Like, he was more than when I went to Duke on full scholarship, he was like, you're going to be a sun dancer? He's like, he was so like,
that was the thing.
That was the thing for him. He could give a shit about Duke. He was like, he's like, you're going to,
honestly, I got 4 years of pretty good school.
Yeah.
Sounds way harder.
Way harder. Way harder, man. And so he literally went out, and we were going to make it out of ironwood, which grows in his yard there in the desert where he's at. And he started to work with ironwood. And he's like, they don't call it ironwood for nothing. If I can broke like hard. Multiple bits, he's like, there's no way I'm going to make this iron. He started one, but then he ended up making it out of purple heart, which is also beautiful wood that comes from Brazil. And so my dad made my pipe stem, just the rough of it with the hole. And then I finished it. And then the two together, it's my mom and my dad.
That's the pipe, but you had to make your plugs too.
Yeah. So then he cut some extra wood for me. And then I carved those into the spikes.
Yeah.
And so basically I had my spikes out of the same wood as my chanupa, which is a super hard wood. Traditionally, it's choke cherry is the wood that they use, which is actually a softer wood. It's still hard, but it can break sometimes.
That's terrible.
Yeah. So it was really nice to have the purple heart. And so I kind of was trusting that it was going to work
Yeah.
And I got there and the chiefs were like, yeah.
Are you going to pierce your chest with the same piece?
Yeah.
In subsequent years?
You kind of keep them if you can. Some people lose them. I learned a little trick is because they go flying out of your chest when you finally break. So you tie off some sinew on the end and tie it to your harness so that when it goes, they stay with you.
Yeah.
So that's a tip if anyone ever wants to.
Yeah, I'm sure. Lots of people take notes. If you want to bring out your journal, if you find yourself in that situation, you're worried about your chest spikes flying out as you pull off the tree.
So let me tell you this. So the first day, so one of the things that made me finally say yes was first you instigated me and you were like, we want to do lodge. So then it started to be there in my field again. It was like stirring up in me these old questions like, oh, am I going to Sundance this lifetime? Is that my calling? Like I'd kind of not felt ready to make that huge of a commitment. And then I came out of a sweat around solstice. This is a couple years ago after you'd done that, said that to me. And I literally come out of that lodge and I go to shake my uncle's hand. He's like, so you going to dance this year? And before my brain could say a thing, I'm all, yep. And I go like one of those moments where you're like, what did I do? And so that next year, in honor of my word, I went out there and I went to support him, to reconnect. And I was there and I ended up, long story short, I was invited to end up drumming. They were short drummers. So I actually started drumming on the big medicine drum, for ceremony. And I ended up supporting the drummers and singing there. And as I did that, man, it started to really move stuff in me. I'm like, okay, I'm really feeling the energy. Because I could literally hit the drum, because the whole ceremony is powered by the drum. And so this drum is going the whole time. And it's like this energy. I literally saw the energy go from the drum vibrating out into the tree. And the tree was like this massive antenna out to the dancers. And then it's rippling out of the arbor, like a massive toroidal field. It's just sending these prayers out across the earth. It was just oh, this is some of the deepest, most primordial technology. Mm-hmm. It's making these offerings truly to the earth and connecting through the drum, through the dance. And it was okay, I need to do this.
Yep. And
the tipping point was one dancer specifically who was out there dancing, and he's a white brother who was out there. And it was amazing because I'm watching him and I'm like, and he's just there strong in his prayer. And that day, the second day of Sundance, my uncle comes up to me. He's like, hey, can you go into the arbor and work on him a little bit, and do some of your bodywork magic on him? He's really hurting. So I go into the arbor. They give me permission to walk in. And he's laying there, man, in his skirt, because we wear a long red skirt and then no shirt, nothing on top. And the crown with the eagle feathers. And he's there with the skirt in between arbor. And this brother has a prosthetic limb.
Damn.
And I'm seeing his leg and I'm like, what? You're out there doing all this on this prosthetic limb, and dancing as if you couldn't tell he was on a prosthetic limb, going for it, And when I saw that and I thought about all my stories of why I couldn't do it and why I was like, all right, shut up. Just shut up.
Yeah.
This is medicine. And I was so moved by him. And so his name's Mike. And I ended up sleeping next to Mike in the arbor this year when I danced. And it was so beautiful, man. The first day I make it through and I'm sitting there next to Mike and we start rapping before we go to sleep. We just finished the sweat in the evening. And, I can hear the water drum kicking off because they're going to the peyote ceremony. They also are doing ceremony there nearby. And it's just so beautiful. Do, 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 do. They're singing the songs and I'm sitting there in the arbor with him. And I'm like, when do you pierce? And he's like, I like to pierce on day 2. He's like, a lot of people wait till day 3 or day 4. That the chiefs all pierce on day 4. And he's like, it's too chaotic. There's too much going on. He's like, I think just pierce right up front. And it's open, clear. And then you're in that prayer deep for the rest of the time. And I said, why do we pierce? I've never really gotten the real download. Why this offering? Why this sacrifice? And because you have the option, your very first year you ever danced, you could choose not to pierce. You could you can do it the 3 next years. And he said, you know what? He's like, the piercing is actually really ancient. Only the men long ago would pierce. And it was very much about honoring the women. He says, because when the men pierce this offering of the flesh and this immense pain, it's the little offering to honor all the pain that women bear to give life. Mm-hmm. And so it's this way that we truly honor the feminine, because it's in offering ourselves and experiencing this pain and just giving it so that life can be. It's it gives us this deeper embodied compassion for the feminine. And when he said that, man, it hit me so deep. And I was just like, okay. That's when I knew. It was first I was second one in line the next day, to dance. And I jumped in the line to pierce. And they mark you with the war paint right in the spot where you're going to get marked and receive the piercing. And I went out there, and you have two options. You can either stand and they'll pierce you standing, or you can fall back and they catch you and they do you on the ground. And I opted for that. And it was just this moment, man. I just went right. As soon as I just fell back and they caught me and laid me down, and the chief and the sub-chief just, put that piercing right through me. It was just like the pain just dissolved. There was no pain. And I was immediately in like a medicine state. It's deeper than any Aya journey I've ever had. It's like I was just in that space.
Aldous Huxley talks about some of the mechanism of action behind that in the Doors of Perception. In all of the different, he didn't talk about Sundance, but he talked about the flagellists who would whip their back, in that tradition until they would reach this ecstatic state. And he talks about that in detail. And I don't recall it quite well enough to go into that. But there's also, from everything that you're doing, from the dehydration to the exertion of energy, the trance of the music, the piercing themselves, everything is coalescing, the fasting, everything is coalescing to put you in, the highest visionary state possible.
Exactly. And I was totally there. And it was like the pain was gone. I got up, still be back up, I had my piercings in, and then my uncle helped, and Ashley was with me, and my two little brothers actually came up too. So it was beautiful. It was like my family was right there, and he walked me to the tree, and at the tree, put on the harness. First they have you pray to the tree, and when I got down to the tree in that moment, I just started to weep, like one of the deepest cries of my life. And in that moment, I literally, as I crouched down to this beautiful cottonwood tree, and I literally saw like every life form that I've ever killed, every life form that I've ever been a part of killing, either indirectly or directly, every cockroach I've ever stepped on, every mosquito, every flesh, every fish the flesh that I've ever taken into my body, they all came in that moment and were there and with me in that moment. And it was just like this deep forgiveness and asking for forgiveness. And like, I'm so sorry. So sorry. Thank you for giving your life so that I can be here right now. And please accept my humble apology and my humble offering here, so that life can be. You all gave your life, like that sacrifice, and that of our moms and my mama. And it was just one of the most powerful cries, man, and just offerings in that moment. And I proceeded to then get up. He put the harness on me, and I went out for my 4 rounds of dancing. And so you tie up to the tree, and then you pull back until the rope is fully extended, and your skin is like pulling right off your chest like this. And that's how that that you're engaged with the tree, like you're fully connected.
Yeah.
And then you
no
dance.
Slack on the rope.
You dance the hardest dance you've ever danced. And one of the warriors was telling me on the first day, we had to go into the chiefs and like explain why we wanted to dance and like make our pledge for the 4 years.
Yeah.
And they, I heard him say this, and he says, in the Lakota, they would say like, you really are dancing, you want to make that rope bounce. Like that rope should be jumping around like the way the battle ropes jump around. Like you want to see that thing flying. And that's when you're like in it. And so that stuck with me. And so I just went for it, man. I had my eagle feather, and I was just like, I was dancing so hard, man. The rope was just flying around off my chest, and I was just like in the trance. And then they would switch to the moment where I'd go back to the tree, I'd pray again, and then I'd go back out and dance. And then on the 4th round is when you give it all your energy that you have left, and you pull off the tree and until the spikes. And a lot of people, you could fall, like anything could happen. And it was beautiful, man.
How'd
you know? My chest.
How'd you know that moment? Did you just had that feeling like this is the time now, right? Like, as it's kind of like reminds me of that kind of when you're in Aya ceremony and you're like, should I purge? Should I not purge? Should I purge? Should I not
like
purge?
Shit, maybe I should purge.
Yeah. Was there that moment, or was it just like really clear that you knew that you had to pull back?
The time when it was time? Yeah, it was. I was pulling hard and it wouldn't break.
Yeah.
It was actually really, really, I was having a hard time. And there was actually one of the sub-chiefs came over, and it was really interesting. And he was like, big Dene brother, and he was like, come on. You don't want me to break that for you? He was kind of giving me a hard time, like, like kind of, oh, come on, you got to dance harder, dance for everyone who's suffering right now, pull that. And it was just like, he was kind of like that coach, and it was like, it's like, wow. And I like almost, and I had that eagle whistle in my mouth, and I was playing that eagle whistle, and it was just like, I was like the eagle that's like trapped, held, and all of a sudden it's just like, boom, and it just ripped off, and I landed on my feet. And immediately they grab you because we have these sage bracelets and anklets for protection, because no one can touch your body when you're in that state. You're like pure.
Right.
Essentially, it's as pure as you can get as an adult human.
Yeah.
And they take you by the bracelet and they run you around the whole arbor. And that kind of like that march, and all the other sun dancers are dancing, basically holding space for you. And it was just like this moment, man. It's like your chest is bleeding, and you're just like deep in it. And that it knew it was the moment. It was like him saying, and especially when he said, "You're dancing for all those suffering right now." It just took me, man. I was just like, okay, what am I doing? It's like boom, and it just broke.
Yeah, when you go from that I focus to that universal cosmic focus, like that's the thing that drives you ultimately. And that's, I think, the thing you can only find in ceremony when things get really tough, or even in life when things get really tough. You keep focusing on yourself, you're gonna get burned out. There's no way you can do it. But when you transfer that to
the limitless,
what am I doing for everyone? At that point, you have seemingly unlimited energy.
It's unlimited,
and unlimited resolve, because it's not about you anymore. It's about someone else. And I think that's a beautiful moment that we all need to put ourselves against some kind of challenge. So we find that. So we realize that when we do get lost in our own selfish, egoic thoughts, which are fine and normal, and we all have them, and it's all part of the game. But if you really want to get driven, if you really want to get fired up, you have to transfer I to we, and then we to everyone.
Yeah. And I really get why you have to go through the portal of Sundance to really walk a medicine road in that, in the red road, in the beauty way, because it really hones you in. There's like, it really humbles you in a whole other level, and deep appreciation for water. I mean, unlike talk about, I get, here's one thing to say, mini wichoni, water is life. Oh yeah, water is sacred, water, da da da. Man, when you go through that, you really get, ain't shit happening on this little dirt ball in space if we don't have water, you guys. And I'm just like, we gotta, it's like, it is very motivating. I know why people will give their lives to protect the water,
The other thing that I think stands out from that is, if you look back in the, old Native American way, every animal they killed it with the prayers and with the gratitude before they harnessed, all of the energy and all of the tools, from the hooves to the skin to the sinews to the bladders to the horns to the every aspect of that animal. But so they were living in accord with always being in balance with the gratitude and reciprocity. So when they danced, they didn't have to do a big catch up. Right. You know what I mean? Like every time as they went, they were saying thank you the whole way. And I can imagine that for those of us, myself included, who rarely said thank you for the animals that I've consumed, that's, there is kind of a big catch up to do, and because I remember, when I took my first deer from the field, I felt that. I mean, there was prayers with that deer the whole way, as it was a clean shot, and as it was laying down, and I put a knife that I'd purified the night before, and I held its head, and I said a prayer, and I put it through its heart, to end its suffering there. Like, that was a really deeply powerful moment, and just deep, deep gratitude. And that gratitude extended from, now that skin is underneath my altar, and that meat, carried us through dozens of meals, and there was always this, like, it had a different energetic quality the whole way through.
Right.
But like, if I go and get, a grass-fed burger somewhere, I'm generally not taking the time to imagine that, because I had no connection with it. Somebody else killed it.
Right.
Somebody else prepared it, and it showed up to me as a burger.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I didn't take the time to connect with that animal. And it's a different way of living, but still possible to do that. Just take that moment, to say thanks. Like, thanks. That's all you need to say. It's not like we're saying don't ever eat meat. We're just saying, abide by the reciprocity, which at the very basic level is fucking thank you. Like, I appreciate you.
Yeah. You died so that I can live.
Right. And I'll live in a way so that all creatures and everything else can survive even longer. And that's our part, because we are ultimately the beings on this planet that will either facilitate the destruction
or steward
and save this planet from the cataclysmic destruction that is inevitable. Like that's the choice we have as humans right now. We either fucking keep fucking around with each other and pretending that we're different and, oh, this is my people and this is your people and fuck this political party and fuck this, culture or whatever. Mm-hmm. Or we decide, wait, we're humans and we're the only ones that can do something about a potential meteor strike or a potential, volcanic eruption that's going to put the earth in 10,000 years of darkness and wipe out most of the species,
or the contamination of all the rivers and oceans, of everything, and plastic. And
like, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing?
Yeah,
like we have the choice to be one or the other, and we're not yet making that choice.
It's urgent, and it's urgent. Yeah. Like we can't wait. Right? Yesterday, I just got the headline: freaking 210,000 gallons just lost from the freaking Keystone pipeline. While they're trying to convince the XL Standing Rock pipeline to be passed and to operate, they didn't notice until they dumped all this crude into the river at the other spot. And they noticed when the pressure got down, like really low, then they shut it off. And it's like, are you kidding? Yeah. Like that's exactly what we're talking about. I mean, it's not a hypothesis. Like this is real shit. And we don't have the luxury anymore. It's like we're there. And so the urgency is more than ever, I believe, and I know on a visceral level, on a cellular level, that we have to be earth keepers.
Yeah,
we are the earth keepers. We're the two-legged. We were inherited the power of fire. We are the stewards. It's our birthright as human beings, as these monkeys, right? Swimming monkeys, to have fire. And fire in all its manifestations and evolution into technology, right? That's still fire. It still makes you warm. Go near a computer, feel your phone. Yep. It puts off heat. So we need to be the ones. We can't forget. We can't think there's some other species that's going to do this. All the species are looking at us right now. This whole planet's looking at us like, okay, leaders, are you going to
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, and it's a double-edged threat because we're slowly destroying it. And we may even succeed in destroying it before the earth is naturally going to destroy it again anyways. Like the earth goes through massive upheavals where most things die. And we're
inevitably, although we're speeding that up,
and
right?
We're speeding that up. We're just hustling it. We're hustling it to the point where Earth is like, that's going to be the only reset that's actually going to save this thing before we truly fuck it up, right? Or we switch it around and then stop ourselves from completely eroding the planet, and also prepare ourselves so that sentient species and the species that exist can continue to survive.
Absolutely.
And all that's our sacred directive, but we just haven't accepted it yet. And I think a lot of people, one of the reasons why I focus so much on consciousness is just trying to fix the downstream problems is like taking a small cup and trying to bail out that crude oil once it hits the water. Like it's important. We'll need to clean off the little animals that we can when there's an oil spill, but we got to shift the consciousness.
We need to stop
of the people who have the tankers, and the people who are everything across the board. But then, even you say something like switch oil, like that is a massive shift in reallocation of resources so that people can survive and economies can survive and food supply can exist. So there's not mass famine, right? So it's like it all has to start from a shift in consciousness and a shift in everybody who's been holding these resources, stuck in their little ego games of mine. Exactly. I need a bigger fucking house. I need a bigger fucking plane. I need a blah, 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 whatever their game is, and realize like, okay, we have the ability to start making shifts, but we need to start making that a priority.
Absolutely.
And that leads, urgently. Consciousness leads. It has to. You have to love, you have to love yourself, love the planet, and love the people and the creatures in it. And if you don't first love yourself, if you're in this, running from your own self-loathing, you got no chance. If life is terrible, why not just let life die? Right. So many people are suffering. People think they're like, these nefarious evil people. No, just life sucks for them. Life is miserable. They're in their own hell.
They're disconnected.
So if you're in hell and you have the chance, well, maybe we'll just destroy hell. Fuck it. Like if you believe that life is hell because of your own shit that you're trapped in, yeah, let it burn. Right. Fuck it. But it's not hell. It's heaven.
It's totally heaven.
And they just have to see that. They have to release their trauma. They have to get past these blocks.
Yeah.
And then at that point, I think people will be motivated.
In the irony is, it's why we came here.
Yeah.
Like we embodied, these souls embodied, so that we could have the experience, the journey, the hero's journey, to heal ourselves, to reconnect. Because once we're connected, that emptiness that we feel inside is no longer empty. It's literally connected back to the source that we came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes from when we stop identifying with ourselves as this separate individual ego with its wants and desires. And, you know, we shift into this, wait, I'm actually part of this fabric. You suffering is actually also me suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That's a powerful realization. It's the highest level of empathy. And that's what we're here to do, is we're here to master that level of empathy and compassion. Because out of that place, there's no question that we wouldn't be defending the water. We wouldn't be defending our neighbor. We wouldn't be defending what needs to happen, what's right for the elephants right now. When Trump passes a law that Americans can go over and kill elephants to bring home his trophies and put their heads on his wall because his son just did that. Like, it's mind-boggling.
Mm.
It's mind-boggling. These species are some of the oldest record keepers. They hear through their feet on the earth. Like, they're that connected to the earth. The greatest land mammals, you know, they're like the whales of the land. And how could we ever even consider wanting to harm those beings? They have so much to teach us if we could listen.
Yeah.
Which, it's great, man.
I mean,
it's twisted.
It is an interesting time. And there's certainly other thoughts about that idea of, you know, hunting these different animals because the village can't eat the elephant. But
do we need to?
They can't, but do they need to? But how else is that village getting money? You know what I mean? It's a very complicated time.
And what is money? They need money because they lost their ways of how to create their own resources, how to access clean water.
Years of
right, colonization,
and also just years of corruption. You know, just
colonization.
People corruption exists even without colonization. People taking advantage of other people has been
fundamental level.
It's been a fundamental issue.
Greed. It's just back to the good old.
It's greed.
Yeah.
It's not seeing everybody else as your brother and sister, as you. You know, and it's the dark side of tribalism. Dominant tribes in any region, whether it was the Aztecs, who would just go wantonly around and just take prisoners of every other tribe they could. Actually, you advanced in the army from Eagle Knight to Jaguar Knight to whatever, which actually determined how many wives you got in the system. So how much pussy you got was determined by how many fucking prisoners you took and gave to the pyramid so that their hearts could get ripped out. I mean, talk about like
it was definitely
dark.
It was the dark.
And in Africa, you know, there was tribes taking slaves from other tribes, and we have this natural instinct. Sure, it played out on the most massive scale when certain tribes got technology, guns and things that they could subdue massive things. But the impulse has been there, ubiquitously, everywhere.
Now balance that with, say, the Chavin.
Right. But then the counter impulse has been there, especially when a culture has been wrapped around ceremony and wrapped around particularly ceremony like something like the Wachuma, which is a very heart-opening, connecting thing. And so Chavin was a culture, if you haven't heard me talk about it, that flourished in Peru 2,000 years ago, somewhere around there, 2,500 years ago. And for like 800 years as the Chavin culture reigned, there was no sign of any kind of war, no sign of massive conflict. And it was because they would hold these massive Wachuma, which we now call San Pedro, a very kind of serotonergic mechanism of action, which fosters that sense of love and connection through the cactus. And they would offer that to all of the pilgrims that came by.
At all levels.
Levels.
Not just nobility, everybody.
Nope. And then for themselves, they would sniff a little vilca down in the crypt to keep themselves in line. That was what they kept sacred. That's why they called it vilca. Is actually translated as the sacred, which is 5-MeO, DMT, and N-DMT, and bufotenine. So not everybody got that, but everybody got the Wachuma. And it just, you know, building it around, instead of conquest and ego, you had something that reliably could take you out of that space, because you can't expect people to be out of the ego unless you give them the tools to show them the other side. Like, how are we going to expect these people who I've just mentioned, who are in hell, have only one mentality, unless they've tasted the other way, they won't have an appetite for it. You know, you have to allow people to taste it. And as we've removed all the ritual and removed all the tools that allow people to experience that, they got no chance.
Yeah, it's a huge piece. And like right now, we have no rites of passage. Like in our culture, and I say our culture, American culture, you know, what is our rites of passage? It's driver's license, the ability to go drink alcohol, numb yourself out, to get wasted. Like, what is it? Like, there's no...
So people seek surrogates. And the surrogates are maybe join the military, right? Which is in a way, a noble cause. You know, if you think of it that way, like
I'm going to is Trump,
right? But the problem is, I think most of the impulse is noble. I think people think because they know they're willing to die, and if you're willing to die
in service,
they're willing to die in service of something. It's just the problem is that at the very top level, the leadership has their fucking head in their ass, so they're not actually, you know. While the people are noble and the cause is noble and the impulse is heroic, you know, the decisions are they have no choice over. You just have to follow orders.
Your job is to die.
Yeah.
Soldier's job, duty is to die.
You know, like, are the people at the top level, is Trump really dropping in and really coming from the highest place, or the top general? No, they're not. And so should they be followed? You know, like that's the question. It's not the impulse of those who serve, which is like, and they should be celebrated for that heroic impulse.
Absolutely.
It's just what are we doing, and do we need to do that? Right. So that's one surrogate. And then for women, maybe it's childbirth, because like you said, that is this offering of pain and sacrifice for life. So maybe you're driven to have children earlier just because you want that rite of passage. I think we crave these rites of passage, and we'll find surrogates, join a gang or a fraternity in its way is its own kind of hazing, like, rite of passage, but it's all dumb. It has no, like, it has a little bit of pain and discomfort, just enough to bond you with somebody, but it doesn't have the conduit that really drive higher consciousness.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's one of the powerful pieces about a lot of Native traditions would have some form of vision quest, you know, and that kind of ceremony is so important. It really takes you into that space of being on your own, alone, and going within, and in a context that can be really, really scary, facing your deepest fears of alone, because we're alone coming in, we're alone going out of this life. And so when you bring that into that moment of a ceremony, having to face that and having to then not just face it, but then ask it for teaching, receive that teaching, and then integrate that, embody that. It's one of the most powerful things. And that's why I know we've talked about this, you know, for creating a rites of passage for people and creating those for people, healthy ones that are in a creative, constructive way that are going to empower you rather than just numb you out, rather than just, you know, go to the bar, get wasted.
Yeah. That's really, I mean, and that is the ritual that we have with our friends. And I know I've talked to you a little bit about reimagining, creating ritual, like intentionally creating ritual. Yeah. And it doesn't need, you know, you can adopt another culture's ritual or something else that exists, or you can just create your own rituals. You know, think about something that puts you in a position that will cause you to have to adapt with higher thinking or getting out of the way, or there's a million ways that you can do that. And I think people inherently, you know, will get addicted to those, you know, these big wave surfers, or these people who are climbing these mountains in intense cold, and you know, even a very simple Wim Hof breathing practice is about finding resistance and using that to create an adaptation where you have to overcome. But whatever that is, we need it.
We need it. And one thing, just to put it out there to people, it's like, why not create rituals around being in service of others? So what about, like, going to refugees? Like, go to, you know, where refugees are trying to cross the ocean there, and literally support them, receive them, help them. Like, what a powerful way to drop in, you know, and to feel humanity and help humanity in that way with your brother or sister.
Yeah.
Like, profound.
Again, that's going to be the strongest motivation, you know, but it's okay to get yourself fit for service first. In fact, it's necessary.
Essential.
You know, if you're not ready to help another person because you're all fucked up, then go through your own shit first.
For sure.
Right? But actually the process of helping others will often be the most helpful thing for you too. So it's that balance.
Yeah.
You know, being able to do that.
Ask yourself, ask your highest self, see what the answer is.
Yeah. It's an interesting time because you can look out and say, like, oh man, things are so fucked up. What are we going to do? But, you know, if you have the warrior's heart, and you look around and you'd say, yeah, the odds are great. They're stacking against us. Momentum seems to be pulling the other direction, but there's a growing sense of resistance. There's a growing consciousness that's ready. Like, if you have a warrior's heart, now is the greatest time we could ever live. Because
Absolutely.
If we bring our very best effort, if we summon all that we have, if we allow all of the help and all of everything that we can possibly bring to bear, we just might get it done. You know, and fuck, there's no better place to be for a warrior. You don't want to be the odds-on favorite, you know? You don't want to be sitting with your army at 1 million and you got to wipe out a 50,000, you know, underarmed and undermanned, You know, you don't want to be the guy with the Gatling gun in Last Samurai. You want to be the samurai with your swords, and maybe, just maybe, you can make it to those guns, and maybe, just maybe, you can change the world, or at least go out on your shield trying.
Well, yeah, we don't have a choice.
We don't have a choice.
We have no choice. It's now or nothing. And I think all species are looking at us, all life, on this only little jewel that we have, you know, floating in space. We forget it's a long way to the next sort of not so great place to live.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like,
this
why
whole recolonization of people want to go to
focus.
Mars. I look at people who you want to fucking go to Mars? Like, are you crazy? I can put you in a box in a desert if you want. It'll be better. Like, if you want to, like,
it's called the biosphere.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's so insane. Like, we're really ready to throw this one in, like, fucking crumple this one up. Like, get out of here.
Come on. We got to do this. Yeah.
Exactly.
And she's asking us. She's screaming at us like, come on, guys. So I really, really encourage everyone. Track what that is for you. Find what that is that activates you. And to be in service. It's what we've come here to do.
Hoka. Let's go. Where can people connect with you, brother?
Yeah. My website, porangui.com, porangui.com, has all of our upcoming stuff. A couple big retreats we're doing out in Hawaii, ecstatic dance retreats coming up here in November, and then again in February. And then, of course, I'm working this winter on the next album, my solo live looping project, Chakaruna.
Nice.
Bridger, yeah. So really excited to bring that up, and just like in the in-betweens of all the running around trying to get that birthed and finished.
Yeah.
Really excited for that. And then, yeah, we're stoked. We're going to be doing another retreat with Anahata, Shamanic Soul Retreat in April. So yeah, some really good chances to drop in even deeper, and then touring. This last year is just amplified, and this coming year is going to just be a lot more of sharing this message, taking it out to the world, and activating people in that way. And just amazing, you know, just watching people just really get lit up, you know, through that sound.
Yeah.
Such good medicine. You don't need anything external. It's just all built in.
And check out this Ayahuasca Remixed album. There's some Bandcamp links if you really want to support P.
Thank you.
If not, drop in on Spotify, get you a taste of it as well. Ayahuasca Remixed, and then the Liquid Bloom album as well. I'll be putting out some of these links and everything for everybody, but it's so fucking good. Thank you for your gift of music to the world. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for everything you're doing, brother.
Thanks, brother.
I love you and appreciate you, man.
Love you so much. Yeah. Bless everyone. Ashe.